It's time for Tycoons of Small Biz, spotlighting the true backbone of the American economy, the true tycoons of business in America, the owners, founders, and CEOs of small businesses. The show's hosts, Austin Peterson and Landon Mance, are registered representatives of Lincoln Financial Advisors Corporation, a broker-dealer, member SIPC, and registered investment advisor. The views expressed by your hosts, Austin and Landon, are not necessarily the views of Lincoln Financial Advisors. Backbone Planning Partners is a marketing name for registered representatives of Lincoln Financial Advisors. Now let's lean in as Austin and Landon connect with this week's Tycoons.
Good afternoon, Tycoons, and welcome to today's episode of Tycoons of Small Biz. I'm your host here, as almost always, Austin Peterson, coming to you live from Gilbert, Arizona. And we got my co-host on the line with us today, Gary Braun, coming to us from the Minnesota. We'll just call it that. I was going to say the Lakes region, the Great Northwest. And
Twin Cities area. Twin Cities area.
There you go. And then we've got our guest, Chase Birky, coming to us. He's based out of San Diego, Las Vegas, Nevada area, but right now I believe he's in the Pacific Northwest. Is that right, Chase?
Yeah, I've kind of been all over the place. So lived in San Diego, now I live in Vegas, spending time in Park City, and now here in Olympia for a week. So I'm kind of all over the place right now.
Gotcha. Well, it's a great time of year to do that. As somebody who lives in the desert, I understand the importance of escaping this time of year. So I'll be leaving actually for Park City area on Thursday evening. So
nice.
Fortunately, it starts with a funeral, but then after that, it'll be escaping the elements and then kind of dealing with some family stuff. So before we jump in, Chase, and kind of introduce you, if this is the first time that anybody's listening to this program and you wonder what it is that we do here at Tycoons of Small Biz, we've been running this podcast for a little over 2 years. We've recorded over 100 episodes. And this is a small business podcast that's put together by small business owners for small business owners. Today's hosts today, myself and Gary, are both small business owners. We have two other partners and co-hosts on the show that we're all small business owners. Most of us multi-generational small business owners. And we believe that the backbone of the American economy is truly the small business owner and what they do to push our economy forward. And so, like I said, a couple of years ago, we started this podcast because we wanted to provide a platform for small business owners to tell their stories, share advice, and give them, content and the ability to push out content that benefits them as well. So with that being said, we definitely have a tycoon on the show today with us, Chase Birky. He's got a great story. He's CEO and co-founder of Dark Horse CPAs. So stay with us. CPAs are not all boring. Many of them are, but Chase is one of those that has kind of bucked the trend. So Chase, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Austin. I will try to not bore your audience too much. Hopefully they can see a side of a CPA that they might not have seen before. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. We're excited to hear your story and have you share it here on the show. So let's actually start on the personal side. We always have our guests kind of tell a little bit about themselves personally. And I know you've got kind of a unique story. So, tell us about where you grew up. Tell us about, your family when you were growing up. Tell us about family now. Are you married? Do you have kids? What's going on in your family life there? And then, kind of what led you to finally get to the point where you're opening up Dark Horse CPAs.
Yeah, so I grew up in Salem, Oregon, which for those of you who are not familiar is not where the witch trials occurred. You wouldn't believe how many times people actually ask that question, to which I respond, do you have any idea when Lewis and Clark set out on the Oregon Trail? But nonetheless, it was a great place to grow up. But I was seeking some sunshine and also looking to further my baseball endeavors. So I went to school at Point Loma Nazarene down in San Diego. And for those who haven't been there, the baseball field there overlooks the ocean. The weather's obviously pristine. And I went down there for my first visit during December.
Go Sea Lions, by the way, right?
Yeah, go Sea Lions. Formerly the Crusaders, but apparently that's no longer politically correct. So they changed the name a couple decades ago. But yeah, went down there in December of my senior year of high school for a little tryout camp. And I'd left some pretty dreary weather in the Northwest and there were Santa Ana winds down there. So it was 84, 85 degrees in the middle of December. It was paradise. So the decision was made pretty quickly there. And ultimately lived in San Diego for 15 years before moving to Vegas. But I kind of got to the point, midway through college that I knew I wasn't going to make the major leagues, and I didn't really want to spend all of my 20s chasing that dream on a bus traveling through the Midwest. So decided to focus my efforts elsewhere, and just came in as a general business administration major without any clear understanding of what I wanted to do other than something in business. And as a result of that, took accounting courses, had the professors, provide me some feedback. Hey, you should think about accounting. It's the language of business, so on and so forth. And I was like, okay, well, that's convincing enough. To learn the language of business is a good start. And so, got into my senior year of college, and the big four and most of the larger firms start interviewing in that fall. And that was 2008. And at that time, I had some friends who had graduated the year before and were struggling to find, just a waiter job at Chili's. It was kind of the heat of the Great Recession. And so I was just under the impression that I just need a job, because I didn't want to be the typical boomerang kid who moves back in with their folks. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It just was not what I envisioned for my own life. So knowing that I could get a job offer, secured, months before I would even graduate had a lot of appeal to me. So I interviewed with Deloitte in that fall, I think it was September, and got a job offer. So was pretty, happy about that. It was a job in their audit department. And when I graduated, I don't know why I had this, much motivation to do this, because I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I figured I should, might as well just try to pass my CPA exam. So I took the entire summer going through that process. Had an existential crisis on my very first exam, which I didn't realize was the hardest exam, nor did I realize how the exam worked. And I was getting so discouraged on, how difficult the questions were and how bad I felt like I was doing. And I actually stood up with probably 45 minutes to go and almost walked out because I was just like, this is a train wreck. But decided just to, sit back down and at least get a benchmark for my score. And so came to find out later that I had done well on that, passed all the exams. And so was kind of cruising into my tenure at Deloitte feeling good. But I found very quickly how difficult life is at a big four, and wasn't really mentally prepared for it. So it was something I knew relatively quickly that it was not going to be my career, at least in audit, nor at a large international firm. So my eyes was on the prize in terms of getting my 2 years, getting my license, and then figuring out the next step. And by a chance encounter, I actually met up with a friend of mine from college who was starting up his own firm that was more focused on tax and client accounting services, although it wasn't called that at the time, for small businesses. And that had a lot of appeal to me. So, kind of set the deck for a departure, right after that 2-year mark, and went into a partnership with him. And did that for a couple of years.
So Chase, how old are you? You're only a couple of years out of school and you're starting your own business a couple of years in. How old are you when you're doing this partnership?
When it started, that would have been November of 2011, which would have been 11 years ago. That would have put me at about 25.
That's pretty young to be starting your own businesses. I mean, pretty green.
Yeah, naive but optimistic, I guess, is the way that I would describe that. And because it was a partnership, it didn't necessarily feel like I was instantly putting myself into the hat of an entrepreneur. So it was kind of a stair step, if you will, to, kind of discover that part about myself, which, to be honest, I had no idea, that was going to be my life, because the entrepreneurship courses in college always scared me. Like, I know nothing about marketing or, any of these other facets of business. But nonetheless, I found myself there. So a little bit of a stair step, couple years of that partnership, and like a lot of partnerships, it didn't work out. And so I left rather abruptly, and was really just focused on, you know, um, just paying bills at that point. So took a handful of clients and just without much of a plan, just started, putting the pieces together to, be able to serve those clients and to build what would eventually become a firm. And, kind of in that process, I realized, that that hunger for entrepreneurship, and started to realize, I could do some of these things I didn't think I could. And I was actually pretty good at them, and the firm was growing as a result. And I was realizing, hey, I could actually create my own destiny and, kind of be the author of my own story, which was really transformational for me, to not just depend on structure from others or demands of others, whether, clients or otherwise. So the kind of the process of that growth, I mean, it was a lot. I was doing everything and getting up at, 4:45 in the morning and working until 7 at night, trying to make it all work. But it was just a really unique and, kind of cool period in my life where I started to realize, just like I said, that hunger for entrepreneurship. And ultimately, we grew the firm as it was to, $500,000 over a couple of years, and that was all fine and dandy. But I was getting a little burned out, in a little bit of another form of an existential crisis, in terms of what did I really want this firm to look like, and where did I really want to insert myself in the business. Did I want to do client service? Did I want to take on more of a CEO role? And ultimately had a number of ideas kind of floating around in my head in terms of something we could do that would be drastically different. And that led me to a 3-day solo, trip to San Luis Obispo, and just put the pen to paper on some of these ideas, and really came up with what is, the shell of what we ended up pivoting our firm to back in July of 2019. And really, that was to be a platform CPA firm, that handled all of the things outside of client service for CPAs, gave them a platform to grow, and also a platform, for folks that had a firm that, just reached a ceiling in terms of their revenue, stretched thin, all of that sort of stuff, to be able to plug into and, really take that next step in their practice. So it's been a journey. We're at pretty much the 3-year mark of it now. But before we pivoted, we were just 4 of us, and now there's 55 of us. So we've really found some resonance in the marketplace with what we're doing, and we've really created something that's, unparalleled in the industry, and a very attractive opportunity for folks that are trying to start a practice, as well as those, who really need that higher level of resource and technology and infrastructure to, really take their practice to the next level. So we've just been running with it ever since.
So I got to imagine, I read your website. I went through a kind of research the things that you did, and I get where you're coming from. It sounds like a lot of it was based on, the struggles that you had to overcome when you were starting your own firm out, and you're trying to remove those obstacles for other CPAs, if I'm understanding that right. What was it like when you started this out, when you were going from 0 to 500K in your first couple of years there? I mean, you got to go hustle, you got to go land the deals, you're probably doing a lot of the delivery yourself.
Oh, yeah.
You're invoicing people, you're collecting, you're doing all that kind of stuff that a lot of the tycoons are familiar. Tell us about what that was like, getting it going, and who's your rainmaker, who's bringing in all the sales?
Well, I was wearing all of those hats at least for 9 months. And then I was able to recruit my co-founder, who joined me 9 months later. But yeah, I mean, it was all hands on deck for just about everything, So what I recognized that, it was unsustainable to do what I was doing for much longer than I did it, right? And so, the folks that were recruiting into our accelerator program, they're typically managers or senior managers at a traditional firm, and they a lot of times don't have the luxury that I had to be, married but without kids, and without too much financial obligations, to be able to get that off the ground. But when you're talking about someone who's got a young family or about to start a young family, going from, a six-figure salary or something close to that to no salary, startup expenses, trying to do all of these things that it requires to actually get to the place where you can bill clients and start paying your debt down, that's a huge sacrifice for anyone, not just financially, but kind of across the board, because you're stretched real thin in terms of how involved you can be. So for me, it was more a matter of, okay, I was able to do this because I was at a place in life that allowed me to do it, but a lot of folks aren't. And on top of that, how much of a desire do many CPAs have to build a brand, to build a sales funnel, to, create the structure of a firm, to hire, to train, all these things that, you have to do when you own a firm, but don't actually provide enterprise value. A lot of the business valuation for a firm is just going to be on its book of business, so how could we create a much better way to get to a place of, running your own show, where, when, and how you work with clients, with the support of not just the firm, but, their peers, because one of the things that scared me quite a bit, going out on my own is I knew what I didn't know, right? So, the paralysis by analysis of, okay, if certain situations come up, how far am I going to go down the line trying to research, and come up with the best solution versus who am I going to have to pass, to another firm. So that collaboration element and that, feeling of being part of a community that's supporting each other, is something that no other sole practitioner experiences, at least to the extent that we've built in Dark Horse. They might be part of certain communities, but in terms of having that mutual buy-in, that we're all here together and we're talking every day, that's a huge intangible that people can't necessarily see from the outside, but once they're on the inside and are benefiting from that, because of all the millions of things that come up, whether it's new legislation, COVID related or otherwise, or just different nuances with states. I mean, I think one of the things that accountants suffer from subconsciously is, when it comes to attorneys, people understand that, a injury law attorney is different from a class action attorney, is different than an employment law attorney, or different than a, criminal defense attorney. People understand these are separate fields of law and that one person isn't going to do it all. Whereas CPAs kind of, get put into a very large bucket that could include, assurance work, tax work, accounting work, and, they don't know what you don't know. They think you know everything. And so, it's scary to be put in that position of, what am I going to be expected to be competent in versus what am I actually?
That happens in my work too, in the sales world. It's, you don't just hire a salesperson, because there's hunters, there's farmers, there's people who sell to really big companies, there's people who sell to mom and pops, there's people who sell complex stuff, there's people who sell transactional stuff, but they're all salespeople. It's the same type of gig.
Right.
I feel like we got the cart ahead of the horse a little bit, and Austin teased with you're not the typical CPA. So talk about how your firm is different than other CPA firms out there, because it is pretty unique.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess maybe the easier question to answer is how is it similar? But, really, your traditional firm is a partnership model where you come in as a staff accountant, typically, after your undergrad, or in this point, your graduate studies, because it takes a graduate level education to get a license. But you're grinding it out and you're working a ton of hours, and all of that money is kind of rolling up the pyramid to the partners, and the goal is to either become a partner in that firm, or get to a level, especially at a larger firm where you're maybe at a manager level, and then you can get that job that's actually going to provide some quality of life and some balance, along with a better salary. So it's really kind of akin to the farm system in a lot of ways for baseball, and being at those lower levels, being in short season or long season single A versus being in the majors, it's a totally different life. But unfortunately, only 2% of folks actually make partner that enter the profession. So, for a lot of folks, they're just kind of hanging on as long as they can, right? And just kind of getting burned out, and just trying to hang on. Really, our firm is more graduate level in terms of, we're not hiring someone who's got 2 years of experience into our accelerator program. They're at least at the 5-year mark, anywhere from 5 years to, in certain cases, 30 years for certain of our folks. So that is a little different from the perspective of, we're not necessarily building people from the ground up, although our principals end up doing that with their staff members. So, different than a traditional, partnership, you've got a defined growth path from accelerator to principal, which is akin to a partner in a partnership. There's certain metrics they have to achieve, and a very clear roadmap of how to do that. And once they get there, it's not a political decision, it just happens. And so, then once you are a principal, in a typical partnership, there's kind of a decision by committee. It's a bit of a bureaucracy. Usually there's a managing partner, but a lot of times, you're accountable to those other partners in ways that end up making you more like an employee than a business owner. Whereas, in our model, as a principal, you run your own practice. And yes, you're always accountable to your peers in terms of, supporting them and, upholding the reputation we have and all of that. But, essentially what you eat is what you kill, or what you kill is what you eat, reverse that. But you run your own P&L. You're not getting these obscure partnership allocations, that you can't really influence, right? There's a profit split that, is well defined. And in terms of how you control your profitability, you've got all of the autonomy to, be able to do that in the way that you see fit and grow as you see fit. There's not billable hour requirements and all the things that, traditional firms have to control. We've really found that if you give people the right resources, coaching, and platform, especially CPAs who are mostly type A individuals that, are high integrity, high capacity, they end up surprising you in terms of what they're able to accomplish, and so our whole mindset is, ground up versus top down in the traditional partnership model, and we're able to control quality by giving people the right platform, the right tools, and the right resources to get it right, on the first go, as opposed to 5 levels of review before something goes out the door. So in a lot of ways, we operate in a very flat structure, with individual profit centers, if you will, who are autonomous in hiring whoever they need to work below them to support their practice. And then that all rolling up, to the firm as a whole. So, in a lot of ways, there's elements that are comparable to a traditional partnership model. But we, have just seen that, when you unleash the human potential by giving them a level of creativity and autonomy, and also support them with the collaboration, coaching, and everything else that we're offering, they're able to, go a lot further in their career than they would have otherwise if they were put into certain boxes. So roundabout answer of saying we're very, very different in terms of, what our model is and kind of how we go about building our people. And also, I think an important distinction really is that, as a leadership team, our customer is the CPA. And their client is their customer. We don't try to get in the way of their book of business that they're building. There's no non-compete. So if they don't see the value that's being provided in the Dark Horse ecosystem, they're free to take that book of business elsewhere. And ultimately, we know that what we're providing is, unparalleled, and, it would be a lot of work to try and replicate these resources that we've built. And it would, for 95% of the folks out there, it just wouldn't make sense to, try and recreate the wheel from scratch, because they all have some semblance of how difficult that is.
Well, you're providing the platform, the tools, the resources, the collaboration, but it's really their business to run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit further. So, you mentioned the experience level of a typical CPA who plugs into your platform, right? But let's talk a little bit more about what that CPA or CPA firm looks like, right? Because it's not just somebody who has that experience, but it's got to be somebody that is looking for what it is that you bring to the table, which is different. And most CPAs probably don't even know that it exists, right? Because it's kind of the big four, and then you've got the bigger regionals, and then you've got smaller shops, right? That may be just one CPA, maybe 1 to 3 CPAs, and then some staff. But that I think that the audience, and specifically, there may be some CPAs listening thinking, gosh, there may be something here. What is it specifically that they should be looking for or be excited about to plug into your platform, as opposed to just continuing to go it on their own? Or if they feel like they're on that partnership route, and you just said, 2% in the big four make it to partnership. So, what should be tipping them off that this is something that they should be listening closely to?
Yeah. So, I mean, if for the folks that are at a firm, you got to ask yourself, if given the opportunity, do you actually want to be a partner in this partnership? And that decision can be influenced on what does that power structure look like? Who are the personalities, in that partner group? What does it look like to function within that group? Is that firm as a whole setting themselves up in a way that's viable for the future? Are they really behind in terms of technology, and creating arduous work processes that are burning people out, that are resulting in a talent shortage? I think a lot of firms, the answer is yes on that. What sort of vision does this firm have for the future? Because we've talked to a lot of folks that are at that point. It's like, yeah, I could become a partner in this firm, but I just don't want to, because of all of those reasons. So I think you really want to be mindful of what you actually want for your career, and whether that's a possibility in an existing firm you're at. And then for the folks that have their own firm, I think the central issue that we keep seeing time and again is that majority of these folks are able to build a 6-figure book of business at some point, but in terms of what it takes, to get from 0 to 1 is different than what it takes to get to 1 to 2 or 1 to 10. And getting to 0 to 1, yes, there's a lot of work involved, and it's not easy, but once you're there, it's an even smaller number of folks, that are able to take that next step and build a staff underneath them, build a technology stack that actually provides efficiencies, build a culture, build a brand, build a sales funnel, all of these things that, you might be advising business owners to do here and there, but, doing it all yourself, trying to, do your client service duties depending on how much talent you have supporting you and how much you're actually involved. You end up wearing all these hats. You've got these compressed deadlines, that just sidetrack any initiatives or projects you're really trying to roll out. What I would say is, look, why wear all of those hats and endure all of that stress, dealing with the things outside of client service? Because the firm you're building, by and large, is going to be valued based on recurring revenue, right? So your actual client list. So if you're spending half or more of your time doing things that are tangential to that, that aren't actually growing that business, you're spending time that you're not capturing enterprise value in. You're probably doing a lot of things that you don't love, that just are required by the business. Whereas, if you were to merge into Dark Horse, really all your focus is about serving your clients, building your book of business, serving your clients better than you previously have, because you now are freed up and have the resources to focus on advisory as opposed to just getting the compliance work done. And as a result, you're future proofing your practice, so that you're not so invested in compliance work that eventually gets marginalized and fee compression and all of that. So it's really about, certain folks are just going to want to have their name on the shingle, and are going to want that level of full control, and that's not something we're trying to solve for. But I think the majority of folks, are really just trying to, build a book of business, serve that book of business well, and minimize the headache of everything that surrounds that that's not actually that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a follow up to that, but let's take a quick break here, a quick call to action for our listeners, and then we'll jump back into Dark Horse and all that entails.
Hey there, Tycoons. Austin Peterson here, co-host of Tycoons of Small Biz. If you think you have what it takes to be considered a tycoon and you're wondering how you could become a featured guest, please follow and then message us at Tycoons of Small Biz on LinkedIn. We'd love to have a conversation with you to see if it is a mutually good fit, and if so, we'll get you scheduled for an interview. If you're unsure about being a guest on our podcast, but are contemplating selling your business over the next few years and you'd like to know what your business is worth, please also follow us and then message us on LinkedIn for your no obligation, informal valuation of your business. We look forward to hearing from you, and thanks for listening to the Tycoons of Small Biz podcast. And now, back to today's program.
All right, Tycoons, welcome back. We're here with Chase Birky, co-founder and CEO of Dark Horse CPA. We've been talking about, really what's different and unique about Dark Horse. Obviously, we've talked about Chase's background, but we were just talking about the reason that a CPA firm or an individual CPA would want to affiliate with Dark Horse CPA. And you kind of alluded to it, but you didn't go all the way there. So my experience with CPA firms is that smaller firms specifically, and really kind of all firms, unless there's something unique about them, they sell for a 1x multiple on their revenue. That's what they sell for. Right. And so, like you said, if you're not building that revenue, you're not building enterprise value in that business. But my gut tells me that what you're building and the way that you're building it takes that 1x to maybe 2x, maybe 3x, right? Maybe eventually 4 or 5x. So, talk to us a little bit about that and how a firm potentially plugs into your firm as well, right? Are you doing an actual acquisition? Or are they just plugging in and sharing some profits? Explain how that works.
Yeah. So we believe that we're building something that has a far higher valuation, than a 1x on revenue. Really what this is, like I said before, is a platform. It's almost a CPA firm as a service, if you want to put a spin on it like that. So not only do they have a structured buyout process to sell their book of business within the firm, that cuts out the broker and the commission, and the pain of transitioning to an external buyer. You also, as a principal, have the ability to purchase stock via stock options, both, when you become a principal and then annually based on the profitability of your book of business. So you're able to participate in the larger enterprise and that larger valuation that we're creating as a result of the technology that we're building, as a result of how the business model operates, and not being dependent on, a list of clients, that could be more fickle than intended. So in a lot of ways, they're able to contribute to and, participate in kind of that larger growth of the enterprise. Eventually we want to go public. That's 5 to 10 years down the road, if that were to occur. But, providing different liquidity opportunities for the folks that help us build this firm, and the ability to earn marketable stock, have their employees, their staff level employees be able to participate in that as well. Because your traditional partnership model, you only get ownership as a partner, unless maybe you're one of those firms that has private equity investment that's figured out something creative. But by and large, you don't have equity until you become a partner, and that equity is really just a deferred annuity for a lot of folks. It's locked up until they retire, and it doesn't really have any marketable value because it's so tied to the actual client list, and that's truly the asset, that it's the revenues off of that, list of clients that is where the value is. So in a lot of ways, we're approaching this more like a traditional startup would as a C corporation, that has RSAs and NSOs and ISOs and all that sort of stuff, but we're building something, not just from a leadership standpoint, but with the input of our principals to develop the solutions, whether technology, systems and processes, or otherwise, to really create a better experience for everyone and drive more enterprise value as a result.
So sorry if I missed that. So if I'm a solo CPA and I want to become part of this, how does that model work? Do I buy in? Do I pay you fees? Do I pay a percentage of my revenue? How does the model work?
Yeah, so we are absolutely not a franchise. So there's no royalties or fees off the top. That's not our model, the way that we monetize. We don't buy the practice either. They don't buy into the partnership. So it truly is, we're standing on our laurels of, you're going to see the value that we're bringing to the table by bringing your practice in, by taking advantage of these resources to be able to grow. But like I said before, we don't have any non-competes, so that sole practitioner that merged their practice in, if they decide it's not for them, they're free to take it back into their own or their old or existing practice. They can merge it elsewhere. We're not trying to control that book of business. We're, like I said before, our CPAs are our clients. So if we haven't served them well enough, that they see the value of being part of the Dark Horse family, then
are you paying them monthly fees then, or are they paying you monthly fees to have access to the platform, or how does that work?
So it's a profit split. So they're running their own P&L, and based on the profitability of their book of business, they're getting roughly 2/3, and then we're taking the other third to pay for payroll taxes, benefits, all the technology, overhead, and then a profit margin. And we're able to make that balance on both sides because we're translating the scale that we have in pricing as a larger firm to the individual level. So whereas they would be, for example, with like BotKeeper, which is an AI machine learning platform for bookkeeping automation, they'd be paying the full, platform fee and the highest per company fee. And this is just one of many examples where we've actually amortized that platform fee over a much larger group of folks, and we have the lowest per company fee. So they're benefiting from these in ways that they couldn't on their own, and so that split ends up working for both sides.
Yeah, I think on the surface, if you hear, 1/3, right, any business owner is going to go, wait a minute. So I'm giving up 1/3 of my revenue. But if you think about everything that you just mentioned, right, the benefits, the the software, all those kinds of things that you guys bring to the table. If I think about my own business, and I'm sure if Gary thought about his own business, about a third of our overall revenue goes to those things that you just mentioned,
Yep.
right? So you're giving them the ability to plug in with some economies of scale, building in some profit for you, but then also potentially taking their marketing from here to here, freeing up their time to focus on client work and client service. And like you said, doing more advisory rather than just compliance work. You know, all the things that every CPA says they would like to do, but they just can't because there aren't enough hours in the day.
Right. And to be clear, it's a third of their net profit, not of their revenues. And that's intentional because we want to be aligned with them to create as much profit as possible, you know, and not just have poor margins as a result of not operating efficiently and effectively. So it's set up that way, you know, for a reason. But, you know, there are, you know, the mindset of, okay, what is this going to cost me to move over apples to apples? How much less am I going to be making? You know, that's a consideration. Clearly, you can't ignore that. But really, you know, we're looking for folks that understand, okay, what does the next 5-10 years look like, and how much more can I grow, and how much more can I make as a result, you know, of these resources in this platform, you know, this collaboration that I wouldn't be able to do on my own, right? For some folks, you know, for everyone, we do a comparative trailing 12 P&L analysis where they send us their P&L for, you know, what they did in their own firm. We show them what they would have made in our model, just apples to apples. Sometimes they're actually ahead of the game and they're making more in our model from day one, which is a win. Sometimes, you know, it's roughly break even, and sometimes they're making less or even substantially less if they're running super lean. But in situations where they're, you know, going to be making a lot less, it's like, look, you can't scale this further than you have at this point because you're running so lean. You're not using any technology, you know, or any staffing to actually be able to add on to this, you know. So it's not going to be for everyone, you know. Folks that are going to be, you know, more akin to being, you know, penny wise, dollar foolish, you know, we're not maybe the right fit for them. But the folks who realize what they can be able to do in our model, you know, that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise, you know, those are the folks, you know, you can tell in those conversations when people just get it. And, you know, those are the ones we're looking for. There's also other opportunities, you know, within our firm to gain revenue streams, you know, that offset any of those additional costs, and a lot of times push you well above, you know, that net that you'd be comparing to. One of which is a financial advisory practice that we're going to be launching in November that will share 23% of the revenue with our CPAs for, you know, all the fee for services for that financial advisory work. You know, so that's somewhat mailbox money. Obviously, there's some work, you know, that's done between the CFP and the CPA, you know, but there's just a number. This is just one of many ways where you can really increase that top line revenue, you know, so that what you're taking home at the end of the day is, you know, far greater than what you do on your own.
So Chase, I'm blown away a little bit I'm working at a boutique firm. I'm not that far out of school, and all of a sudden I've got the term you use is a platform CPA firm, which is a completely brand new thing, right? Nobody's done this type of thing before. How did you get from I'm a young CPA in a boutique firm to I'm building a platform? And how long did it take you to kind of build this thing up to have people go, hey, I want to be part of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So 2011 to 2015, that was that time period, you know, that I was in the boutique firm. And it took 4 years, you know, middle of 2015, the middle of 2019, before we actually pivoted into this platform CPA firm model. You know, so this wasn't an overnight sort of deal. However, it's felt overnight in terms of once we made that pivot, how quickly we grew thereafter. You know, in terms of where the idea came from, it really was just, you know, a matter of survival to get started. and then maybe a secondary act of survival as to how I was actually going to be happy, and fulfilled in what I was doing beyond that, because I didn't just want to have it be, that traditional model and just, earn more by, breaking my back further. Um, I'm someone that I think never really felt like, um, never felt comfortable in the skin of an accountant. I felt like I had weaknesses where a lot of people had strengths, and then had strengths in areas that a lot of folks had weaknesses, and I think that I was pretty down on myself, for a lot of years in terms of, you know, the majority of my job being in what I felt like were my weaknesses, and not being able to utilize the strengths, So part of this was identifying, what I felt like I could bring to the table that was unique, that other CPAs in our case, could benefit from, and structuring what I brought to the company around that. But, in terms of actually getting it off the ground, that was, you know, that was a lot of work. I mean, that was, you know, like any entrepreneurial effort, where you're bringing a new product to the market, you've got to get people to believe in it before it's actually created, right? You've got to sell them on the vision. You got to show them, where you are going, how you're going to get there, and how they're going to be a part of it. So we've had this conversation internally before. I used to be very um, tight-lipped on who I would tell what about what our model was, because no one else was doing it, and didn't want to get ripped off or anything like that. But we finally got to the point where it was like, okay, we could give someone or anyone the playbook, but in order to actually execute on that and build that buy-in and build that initial flywheel, there's not a lot of folks, that would be able to do that. And I was really only able to do it up to a certain point. Myself and my co-founder having these conversations, and then we recognize, okay, we need someone who is dialed in this area of recruitment and can just go out there and sell ice to Eskimos. And we found that in a friend who was consulting for us, and he was also a client of ours at the time. And he's been able to just totally transform not only our recruitment effort, but the development of those folks. And, the way that he can sell them on joining Dark Horse, he can also coach them on how to sell to clients, and when you talk about, what accountants are good at and maybe what they're not, I think a lot of folks are surprised to learn that they're a lot better than they thought on the sales side, and the conversation isn't, a telemarketing, cold pitch. It's really just providing value, being a personable human being, and just, I mean, the bar is actually kind of low, right? And so people's expectations are low as a result. And if you can come in there, prepared for the conversation, friendly, and provide value, you're going to close that business. And then we're going to also show you how to, propose different projects and scopes to clients and get through that whole process. So in a lot of ways, it's just been, okay, you get as far as you can with what you have, then you have to have another level of resource and another level of expertise. In our technology, we realized we were really at our limits in terms of what we could handle and what our competence was on that side of the business. So hired a VP of technology, and he's been running with that since November of last year. So it's I think the biggest thing that I am accountable to bring to the table is sourcing, identifying, and evaluating talent, to run areas of our business.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think it's, I know Gary and I have spoken about this before. It might have been actually way back when Gary was a guest on our podcast before becoming one of the co-hosts. But, we talked about how, unfortunately, business owners don't always know, and this is not industry specific by any stretch, but CPAs certainly fall into this category where they don't know exactly when to make that next hire, right? So that they can literally take one of the hats off that they're wearing, right? And, Gary specifically on the sales side, a lot of the times the founder and the CEO of the company is also wearing the sales VP hat, right? And so I think that, what you're showing us is that you're starting to see, you guys are still a pretty young company. I mean, it's only been 3 years that you've been on this portion of it, right? On the platform side. I know you've been doing the CPA work longer, but, it's nice to see that you're recognizing, okay, I need the help on the technology side. I needed the help on the recruiting side. I'm good at sales, but this recruiting guy really helps our CPAs that come in to be better at selling themselves, in addition to selling them as to why they should be on our platform. So all of those things, whether you know it or not, and I have a feeling you do, are the things that increase that enterprise value of your organization. And that's if more business owners could get out of their own way and realize that by letting go of more things, the value of their organization goes up, a lot more people would not hit that plateau that so many business owners hit, and CPAs specifically hit that quite a bit and are not able to go beyond that.
Yeah. Just to tag onto that, and it's the company I was with prior to starting Pivotal Advisors was we went from $1 million to $400 million in 11 years. And I got to tell you, the things that you do at $1 million are way different than the things you do at 5 million or 10 million or 50 million. And you got to build the system, build the engine, change roles, get the heck out of the way. So the kind of leads into the question is, what do you got to do next? You built this thing to help other people scale, but what do you got to do, Chase, to help you scale? What's your next big move that you got to make to get to that next level of growth?
Yeah, I think, well, technology is a huge part of that, because there's a lot out there in terms of what you can do. Nothing really off the shelf is going to get you there. And a lot of what is in our industry is just a lot of, off the shelf apps that are for a specific part of a practice. The only larger ecosystem apps are from the larger, CCH and Thomson Reuters of the world that are basically legacy systems that they've tried to convert to cloud. Some of them still aren't even cloud. So there's a ton of shortcomings that are inherent in those systems. So to the extent that we can develop our own, or continue to develop, I should say, our own proprietary technology that brings those apps together in meaningful ways and then goes beyond that and provides, that efficiency and effectiveness that, takes folks out of the data entry, and the compliance work and allows them to focus on advisory. Our growth is going to be a result of the growth of our accelerators and principals, as well as our ability to continue to attract, new accelerators and merge in other principals. So there's that. Client accounting services is a very growing area in public accounting. I like to say it's akin to IT, where IT used to be in-house historically, and then it got to a place where it was outsourced, and now really the talent resides in those outsourced firms because they're getting exposure to a lot of different companies and they're growing as a result of it, as opposed to doing things one way, the way that one company does it. Same thing's happening on the accounting side. A lot of startups, doesn't make sense to hire a CFO, but a fractional CFO makes sense, right? So really evolving in that area of our business and creating structured processes, tech stacks that are more uniform for more productized offerings, and being able to scale that and ride that, growth wave. A lot of firms are just very behind in terms of what that offering is. It's very undefined and very ad hoc, and isn't providing a ton of value at the end of the day to the client. So that's huge. I think this financial advisory, practice we're going to launch is going to be huge as well in terms of the global offering to our clients, and the stickiness therein, as well as the switching costs, for a CPA to go do it on their own and miss out on that revenue stream. But I'm also, I guess, humble enough to know that I don't know exactly what is going to be required to, get from 6 million to 10 million to 20 to 30.
Yeah.
Those things aren't always obvious until you're in the thick of it. And then you're like, okay, well, this worked at a smaller scale. It does not work at scale, so whether that's systems and processes or, other, leadership, team members, I just am resigned to the fact that I'm constantly going to have to be keeping a pulse on the business and, be ready to pivot, where those pivots are needed.
Yeah, so it's interesting that that's the direction you took it, because I was on a webinar earlier today that we put together with a group that we're affiliated with, and it was a webinar about M&A activity in 2022 versus 2021 and what they're seeing and what's different today compared to then, and all those sorts of things, and there were some private equity groups on and investment bankers and so forth, and one of the things that one of the private equity group guys said was, in the past, and it wasn't, it's not black or white, but in the past, they would typically look and say, okay, if we're looking at an organization and we're gonna be willing to buy this organization for X, we're buying it because we would look at it and say, if we add this many full-time employees and make some other investments in some other areas, we can take it from here to here, right? Well, now it's more, yeah, employees are sometimes important. And, now we're in a place where we may not even be able to get the employees that we need to do certain things anyhow. But what can we do from a technology standpoint within that firm to pour fuel on that fire to then take it from here to here, right? And so it's interesting that, you talk about that. I mean, financial planning, accounting, insurance. I mean, there's so many industries that, we're all kind of loosely tied to, where the technology is so far behind. And if you can turn that into something that really makes you guys unique and frees up time and ability to generate more revenue and to do it with less, employee need, less hours needed from the principal, all those sorts of things are going to be what that fuel is that you need to go from 6 to 30 million in the next 2 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for us, it's just one component of supporting our principal, our accelerators, our accountants in general, and ultimately their success is our success, so our focus is really just centered around how do we provide more value to their practice? Because to the extent we can do that is to the extent this whole thing is going to work.
Yeah. Any final words, Gary, before we let him bring us home with how to get in touch with them?
Yeah, you playing any baseball anymore, or how do you get any time to throw it around?
I actually, for my birthday last year, my wife rented out the Las Vegas Aviators ballpark, and we did some BP there, and realized I was a little older than I thought I was. I wasn't able to turn on the inside pitches like I once was, but it was a ton of fun, and I finally hit one over the fence, so I felt pretty good about that. But yeah, I played a little bit of men's, league wood bat back in San Diego for a couple of years in my late 20s, early 30s, and kind of got those juices flowing again. I was like, oh man, would have been interesting to see where I could have taken this, as opposed to just, being a weekend, sort of player. But I enjoy the game a lot. Had a lot of fun watching the home run derby last night. I'm a Mariners fan, so I was really pulling for Julio Rodriguez there. It didn't quite work out, but yeah, no, I mean, whenever I get the chance, to be involved, I'm open to it as long as I have time. That's the biggest.
Wait till you get old like me, and then it's whack a ball, sit in the cart, whack a ball, sit in the cart. That's about all I can maintain now.
Yeah, right now for me, it's whack a ball, go find it in the rough, go hit it out of the sand, whatever it is. Yeah, it's my golf game needs some help. That's for sure.
Well, I think we can all relate to that. So, since you mentioned that you're a Mariners fan, I don't know how closely you follow baseball now. You watched the home run derby last night, so that's probably a pretty good indication. But what are your thoughts on the chances that the Yankees break the Mariners' single season wins record?
Geez, wouldn't like to see it, but there is a decent chance. I mean, it just all depends, because you get into August and teams that are hot cool down, teams that weren't, heat up. We're halfway through the season. I don't think they'll do it, just because I think they'll hit some sort of skid. But it's also very possible. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of sun, so you may not be able to see. That says Fenway Park. I'm a big Red Sox fan, have been a long time. So I, of course, don't want to see the Yankees break that record either. But they seem to have like what starts to be a skid. You're thinking, oh, they lost 5 out of 6, and then all of a sudden, here they go again. I mean, they beat the Red Sox twice over the weekend by 10 or more runs. And it's just, yeah, they have a really strong team this year. And if any team ever has a chance of breaking that record, it's this year's Yankees, I believe.
Yeah. Well, maybe the Mariners will get the consecutive win record if they keep things up. They got 14 straight. Granted, I would imagine after the All-Star break, they'll probably lose their first game after the break. But as a baseball fan, I do have to say I went to Fenway about 3 years ago. It was before the pandemic, and I've never been around a more electric atmosphere for a baseball game in my life. It was a great experience.
Yeah. Amen. I tell people that all the time. I said, I don't care if you're a Yankees fan, for crying out loud. If you like baseball, you will love watching a game at Fenway Park. It's not comfortable, right? Like it's old seats and there's obstructed views and there's, all this kind of stuff, but the crowd knows all the time what's going on with the game. And about a third of the crowd is actually scoring it in a scorebook. That's how engaged they are in baseball. So yeah, it's one of my favorite places in the world to be. I've been there multiple times. Actually, probably not going to get there this year. I think I might actually see the Red Sox play the Yankees in the new Yankee Stadium in September, because my wife's birthday is on September 23rd. We're going to be on the East Coast already. She wants to see a Broadway show. And the Red Sox are in town playing the Yankees. And I've only been to the old Yankee Stadium, not the Yankee Stadium. So I think we may catch a game the day after her birthday. She's made that very clear, not on her birthday, the day after. But yeah, I'll see a baseball game anytime, anywhere for sure. So Chase, really appreciate the opportunity to have you here on the show. Appreciated the conversation, your unique spin on things. Where can people find you? Where can they track you down? CPAs that are listening or otherwise that want to know more about Dark Horse.
Yeah, so to learn more about what we're doing on the CPA side, a good resource is abetterway.cpa. That's abetterway.cpa. You can find us on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter @Horse CPA. Or you could just reach straight out to Justin if you're interested in joining our accelerator program or becoming a principal by merging your firm in. He's Justin at darkhorse.cpa. But yeah, number of ways to get in touch with us. But to learn more, abetterway.cpa is a great resource, and it also has some ways to reach out to us embedded within it.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for the conversation. Thanks for being willing to come on the show, and we appreciate the relationship and look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you guys having me. Great conversation. We'll be talking.
All right. Thanks, Chase.
You've been listening to Tycoons of Small Biz, proudly hosted by Austin Peterson and Landon Mance. Austin and Landon are comprehensive financial planning professionals specializing in financial, estate, and succession planning for small business owners. Austin and Landon have offices in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Las Vegas, Nevada, and represent clients in 14 states throughout the country. Join Austin, Landon, and the featured Tycoons live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. right here on Business Radio X and your favorite podcast platform.